Welcome back, Mystic Wonder fans. This is Ben, and this is episode 3, Consciousness. Let's get right down to it. So, I have quite a theory to lay on you guys. It's essentially this. Consciousness is a substance. What does that even mean? It's weird. I don't like it. But it's true. It takes some getting used to, it takes some understanding. But once you see it, you can't unsee it. Because consciousness is fundamental. I would even go further than that. I'd say consciousness is all. Consciousness is reality. First of all, what do I mean by consciousness, right? Simply awareness. Just pure awareness. That's it. That's consciousness. That's how people are using the word these days in the New Age. Anyways. How did I come to this ridiculous conclusion that consciousness is a substance? Well, I'm a philosophy major, so we spend a lot of time talking about what is the substance of the universe. That's basically metaphysics. What is existence? What is being? Questions like that. So I'd say that's probably the most fundamental question to metaphysics is what is the universe made out of, right? What is it? And it seems like modern science is giving us a pretty good answer, right? I disagree. I don't think so. I think modern science couldn't be more far off. This is evident in when you look at things like the hard problem of consciousness. We'll come back later as to why. How does that relate to the substance of the universe? They're actually connected. So any knowledge we have about the universe comes through experience. If we adopt a classical empiricist stance, that at least any explicit knowledge we have must have come through our experience. Even like, what about mathematics? Well, at some point you experience the understanding of it, or you experience learning it, something like that. So any concept of what the substance of the universe is would come through experience. So we're left with a more specific question. What is the substance of experience, of subjective experience, conscious experience? So right now, give you a little context. The predominant paradigm in the West, in the modern world, is known as material realism, usually just called materialism. And it's what it sounds like. Everything that exists is just matter and energy. Some kind of configuration of matter or energy. That's it. That's materialism. Simple enough, right? But even in the West, back in 1710, George Berkeley, he showed that there's a huge problem surrounding our whole idea of what matter is. Is matter the stuff we see? That was the question he analyzed. He actually showed we cannot prove the existence of matter outside mind because all we have is perception. Perception and experience, well, that's something mental. That's actually an object in your mind. Perceptions are part of your stream of experience, which is something phenomenal, something mental in that sense. So Berkeley asked, are perceptual objects really the external objects themselves? And through a very clever series of dialogues, he showed that they can't be. It doesn't make any sense. So Berkeley is kind of the figurehead, the spearhead here of idealism in the West. Whereas in the East, idealism has been popular for thousands and thousands of years, especially in India. India is the idealist. Idealism is that mind is primary, or consciousness, more specifically, is the primary elemental constituent of the universe, is the substance, basically. And India, their Vedic philosophy, they've believed this for thousands of years. So it's an ancient philosophy. It's not like we've never known this, that consciousness is a substance. Is that modern day in the West, we've been kind of blind to it. Anyways, we're left with the question, what is the substance of experience? What is it that all experience is made out of? Or what is its intrinsic nature? And I believe consciousness itself is the substance of experience. What do I mean by that? Consciousness? Substance? That sounds ridiculous. Yeah, crazy. I know. Yes, it's crazy. But seriously, let's consider it. Let's consider it. Let's be open-minded. So you look around, you're having experiences. There must be some kind of substance to your experience. What is it that makes it real? It makes it manifest. There's got to be some kind of substance to the things you see. Just analyze your experience, the objects you feel, things you see, things you hear. What is the substance of all these experiences? Maybe it's consciousness itself. Pure consciousness. Not consciousness of anything. Just pure awareness. Modified. Manifesting into all these different forms. Consciousness of this, consciousness of that. Consciousness in this form, basically. Consciousness in all these different forms. It's all a modification of that pure awareness. That's what experience is. So this is the perspective known as non-duality. Advaita Vedanta was the ancient Vedic term for it. Advaita Vedanta means non-dual conclusion of the Vedas, which were their philosophical and religious texts, the Vedas. So, the non-dual conclusion of the Vedas, non-dual awareness. It's not awareness of mind or awareness of body. It's that non-dual awareness that precedes both. The awareness of external environment and internal mind, emotions, desires, whatnot. So, yeah, just to recap, this position is called idealism. And it's kind of the counterpart to the mind-matter debate, where the other side would be materialism, which is the predominant one that most scientists right now in the West would subscribe to. So, how did I come to this conclusion? Before we go over like technical arguments, I want to describe the experience I actually had, because I used to be a materialist. I went into college and I declared myself a materialist for a couple of reasons. One, it seemed to be the most logical stance. You know, it seemed to be based on science and reason. You know, every good scientist is a material realist. That's the impression I got, at least. You know, and one class they even construed the only alternative to materialism as being solipsism. The only alternative, monism. Monism is the idea that there's one substance the universe is made of. Monistic metaphysics versus dualistic metaphysics, that there's two substances, like the classic Cartesian mind and body. There's a material body in space. There's an immaterial mind made of thought, and those are just separate substances that interact. But this has so many paradoxes, and it just doesn't make any logical sense. How do they interact? That means there's some kind of underlying unity to the both of them. How would we ever know about this other realm if it was completely separate and distinct? So philosophers kind of hate substance dualism, at least. They like monisms a lot better. The idea that everything, there's a fundamental unity, a unified field, if you will. That's how they're putting it in physics these days. So, when I first heard about the hard problem of consciousness, which is pretty much the big question in philosophy right now, and neuroscience, and it's simply, how can neurons firing be identical to experiences? Why should these brain processes, why should they be identical to subjective experiences? Yellow, red, depth, warmth, whatever. It's all known as qualia, any qualitative experience. Any experience really is just qualia. Qualia is just experience. So why should material arrangements of particles in the brain be equivalent to subjective experiences? And that's basically the hard problem of consciousness in a nutshell. Consciousness meaning conscious experience. Why is there actual awareness? How could that be made out of non-awareness, non-experience particles? And yeah, how could it? How could that? It's a problem for materialism. Assume everything's material states. Why is there qualia? There's an explanatory gap between these neurons firing and the subjective experience. So that's a big hot topic right now. That's kind of what spurred this whole thing. So I started thinking about this hard problem of consciousness. I started reading the books, dabbling in the conscious mind and other various texts about this. As a philosophy student, I was personally just very curious about this. And I mean, it's consciousness. It's the thing you're most intimately aware of. People can go on and on about how it's the most fundamental thing we know, and yet it's so mysterious. It's kind of a paradox. But anyways, I learned about epiphenomenalism. So I was a materialist, but I kind of this epiphenomenalist leaning, like is experience really identical to the brain, or is the brain somehow creating or producing experience, like generating it, which is an epiphenomenalist stance that the brain causes mental states, but then these mental states don't cause anything. They're just the physics of the brain that cranks out, the chemicals move, ions move across membranes, all that happens, and somehow mental experience is associated with that. It's an epiphenomenon of that. So that was my basis. So how did I end up jumping ship? Go from materialist to idealist. Total 180. Happened through the stroke of insight. So I was sitting in my chair, my desk chair. I was watching a YouTube video, actually. I was contemplating the nature of the physical world. So I had been exposed to these Eastern ideas before, these consciousness-based metaphysics, but they seem too mystical to be true. I just dismissed them like, that's ridiculous. But they were in my memory, like I had heard of them. So anyways, I was sitting there thinking about the hard problem. My vision of the world just changed. I was taken by this rush of focus and awe. And I felt like I was seeing things how they really were for the first time. I realized that all those objects and colors and lines, they were all part of my mind. They were literally made out of mind stuff, experience. This was all part of my stream of experience. Everything around me was my own mind. All this perception. So this totally wowed me. I was just astounded. I just couldn't stop looking at things. Of course, a noetic experience like this, somewhat mystical experience, it's to some degree ineffable, like it's indescribable. I'm going to try and do my best to describe it. But it dawned on me that the only thing we've ever experienced in life is experience. Or the only thing we've ever known in life is subjective experience that is happening in your mind. Mind in the phenomenal sense, rather than the psychological sense. Because the phenomenal sense centers on experience, whereas the psychological centers on thought and belief and emotion, behavior, desire, more the psychological aspect of mind, the intellect really, whereas the phenomenal concept of mind is more like sentience in a way. It's what people mean when they say mind, meaning consciousness. Anyways, so part of this realization was that experience is knowledge. You look at things and you know what you're seeing. And this sounds so trivial, but it matters in philosophy. It matters for things like Thomas Nagel's the knowledge argument, or Frank Jackson's knowledge argument, and the parallel Thomas Nagel's what is it like to be a bat. So the experience is a kind of knowledge. If you knew everything about the physics of color, the wavelength, and how it hits the retina, and you knew everything about the neural processing, everything, but you still had never seen color, so you're colorblind or just blind. You've never seen red. There's still something you don't know. You don't know what red is, what the experience of red is. You don't know what it's like to see red, which just is the experience of red. The experience of red is what it's like to see it. So experience is knowledge. It's a technical point, but it's important. Later in life, I found out actually Bertrand Russell had the same insight. So he termed it knowledge by acquaintance, because you're just directly acquainted with it. You're immediately aware of your experience. It's not, you don't have some chain of arguments or reasoning to say, oh yes, I'm experiencing this. You're just directly aware of it. You know it. It's knowledge by acquaintance. Your acquaintance, he called it sense data. Everything's made of sense data, which is his technical word for experience, pretty much. So at this point, I began to take seriously the idea that consciousness could be fundamental, which would be absurd otherwise. It's some kind of large-scale, property of neural whatnots. How would it be something fundamental to the universe? It just sounded stupid. But then after having this direct experience, I started to take it seriously. I started to see the logic in these idealist and mystical systems of thought that take consciousness as primary. So it's like space-time. That's something that can be readily accepted as fundamental to the universe, space-time. So consciousness is something like that, where it's fundamental to the universe, even though it seems more absurd than something like space-time. But why does it seem so absurd? After careful consideration, I think it's just because we've been brought up in a materialist paradigm. There's a whole lot of cultural, psychological conditioning that goes into your belief system. In some cultures, idealism is accepted with the same readiness with which we dismiss it, like India. And so, yeah, it's only absurd because we've been taught everything's material. If you're taught, from growing up that what the universe really is, it wouldn't be weird or absurd. So anyways, why exactly do I think consciousness is the substance of experience? Well, all conscious experience is made of consciousness. This is something you can directly intuit. It's it's a self-evident realization you can have. That everything is consciousness of something. Consciousness of this screen, consciousness of this circle, this color, this sound. Or equally put, consciousness in this form. Consciousness in the form of yellow, consciousness in the form of sound or anything. So all experience is the same substance of consciousness, but with some different content, some different form. Consciousness of something else, consciousness in a different form. So what does it mean to be aware of something? I think the easiest thing to look at is just vision. It's our most robust and developed sense. So what does it mean to be aware of a visual percept? It means that object is in your visual field. Your visual field, in turn, is an object in your field of awareness. In your field of awareness are these objects. They're part of the content of your consciousness. So what I'm saying is, in a very real sense, visual experience is made of consciousness. This is something you can see at a certain level of realization. This includes the perceptual objects themselves. Everything you see is quite literally a manifestation of consciousness, an expression of it. So while experience can be thought of as taking place in consciousness, it can equally be conceived of as being made out of consciousness. I'll give you a couple seconds to take that in, to just think about it. Because, a lot of this stuff, they say, oh, you need years of meditation or something like that. Because it is, kind of a weird thing. Sometimes it can't be grasped by the intellect. It has to be this direct experiential insight. So there's plenty of methodologies out there to bring you to these states. And then there's all the methodologies of meditation and whatnot. And then there's some of the shortcut methods, taking a psychedelic, just induce a mystical experience like that, which is, might be the future. But anyways, if awareness is the background of experience, it kind of contains it. But if everything experience is made out of it, it's also immanent, like it's the fundamental substance. So it is, in a way, both immanent and transcendent. I think something that might help at this point is a few metaphors. So if experience is like a painting, consciousness is the paper that it's on. If experience is like a movie, Consciousness is the screen, the container of it, the background. But equally, if consciousness is like a sculpture, if experience is like a sculpture, consciousness is the clay, the substance it's made out of. If experience is like a play or a drama, consciousness is the theater itself. So these are a couple of ways you can kind of think of it. So another point is that experience is inseparable from consciousness. You can't have an experience and no one experienced it was not consciously experienced. If you went unconscious, as we say, in the next second, all this would go away. There'd be no visual experience. There's no experience at all. That experience is completely dependent upon your consciousness. It wouldn't exist without it. There can be no experience without the consciousness experiencing it. How could you have an unconscious experience? It's kind of a confused idea. So any and all experience boils down to some modification of the form of consciousness. So that's kind of what I'm getting at here, saying that consciousness is a substance. So lastly, let's dig a little deeper into Bertrand Russell's idea, his concept of knowledge by acquaintance. That's what experience is. So the knowledge I am, that's the fundamental knowledge. That's the core. I mean, even Descartes saw that. Your own mind must exist. Cogito ergo sum. You know you exist. How do you know? You just know it. You're just aware of it. You know that this is not nothing. There is existence. You know you exist. So I am is that fundamental certainty. And so what is experience but the knowledge I am in this particular form? I am aware of this particular form. And you know that there's the form there. Say your whole world was a dream. Descartes pointed that out. That's a logical possibility. This could have all been a dream. It was all a dream. How is that possible? It's because all you've ever seen is perception, experience. You cannot doubt that you're having the dream. You can doubt that there's a real world. You can't doubt that you're having the dream. There's something going on. You can't just doubt that you're having conscious experience. Descartes called it the method of doubt, and then what you can't doubt is the fundamentals, the certainties. So, what is awareness of a form but knowledge? Awareness of information, essentially, because you know what you're experiencing. If you're seeing blue, that's some information. So all experience is knowledge, which shows the fundamental role played by the knower. There is no knowledge without the knower. Knowledge is in the mind of the knower. There cannot be knowledge and it's not known. Another way to put this is, how do you know you're conscious? Ask yourself, how do you know you're conscious? You just do. You are directly aware of it. It's self-evident. That's as much as I can say. It's got this epistemic immediacy, which you philosophers out there might object to or embrace. That's a controversial thing in philosophy, epistemic immediacy. But it's game changing if there is epistemic immediacy, which there is. It's knowledge by acquaintance. It's the fundamental knowledge. It's the foundational knowledge. So if everything's made of knowledge, experience seen as knowledge, now I think that gives you a better idea of how the consciousness of that knowledge would be the substance of it. Hopefully this is making sense. I know this is a weird idea that consciousness is a substance. And already you just think of that and there's so many objections coming up, but it's really true. It's crazy. But the more you dig into this, the more literature you find, the more people out there you find. There are so many people out there that are idealists, way more than you might think. It's way more popular than you might think, and it's rising fast. I mean, material realism is crumbling, absolutely crumbling on all sides. I mean, you got a lot of theorists bringing in the quantum physics of it, disproving local realism, disproving all these mind independence, or you know. There's we don't really have to bring in the quantum mechanics. This issue is so much more fundamental than any material mechanics. That I feel like, why even go there? If quantum physics supports this, then great. That just is more consistency, more corroboration. But we don't need it. We can go just on pure logic and self-evidence. And yeah, this is not a new theory. I mean, you got all the idealists throughout history. You got Berkeley, Kant in a way. Spinoza could be interpreted as idealist. You got Leibniz. Back to but if there's a paradigm that really takes the cake for idealism throughout history, it's got to be the ancient Vedic philosophy found in Hinduism. It's an entire culture based off idealism, based on non-dual awareness as the ultimate reality. So yeah, I gotta pay respect to the Vedic philosophy. There's lots of subcategories of Vedic philosophy, lots of technical differences. The devil's in the details. What matters is that all forms of Vedic philosophy acknowledge that Brahman is the substance of reality. So what is Brahman, you might ask? A quote from the Aitareya Upanishad. His true nature is pure consciousness. I mean, there's so many quotes in the Upanishads. I could bring in 100 quotes, but that's the simplest one. His true nature is pure consciousness. This is something that transcends the waking, dreaming, and sleeping states. This is pure consciousness. This is like transcendental consciousness, non-dual consciousness, pure consciousness, because it's consciousness without an object, or itself is the object. The subject is the object, so it's non-dual. It's knower, known, and active knowing are one. The knower is knowing the knower. So it's almost like consciousness of nothing, because it's not consciousness of anything. It's pure consciousness. This is a whole interesting topic we can get into for another video, because there's just so much to say. But in Hinduism, Brahman, pure consciousness, is referred to as the true self. Why is he referred to as the true self? Because in Hinduism, awareness and the self are inseparable. There is no awareness without the one who's aware. There's no experience without the one experiencing it. They are completely inseparable. Awareness is what puts the subject in subjective experience. So it puts the consciousness in conscious experience. It entails that there's one who is aware. And these two things are the same thing. If the entire universe was unconscious, could you really say that there's a self? And how could there be consciousness without the one who is conscious, the self? They're just the same thing. They're the subject. If everything's similar to a dream, it's the dreamer of the dream. So Brahman is both the true self and pure awareness. That's the Vedic concept, that they are the same thing. That's part of the non-duality. So, let's wrap this up. Almost at 30 minutes. I'm sure your attention spans are wandering. If we accept consciousness as a substance, we are forced to reevaluate paradigms such as material realism. However, I don't really believe scientific realism has to necessarily be limited to material realism. I actually think physicalism will hold to be true. Physicalism in a broad sense. Regardless of whether some alternate physics or higher dimensional physics are necessary, I think if there's a way something works, it can be modeled, described, predicted, If there's some kind of structure that can be modeled physically. That's what physics is. It models things. It predicts things. So even in like what they call non-deterministic phenomena, like those in quantum mechanics, where will the particle collapse? Where will the wave function collapse? Here, there, we don't know, but we can describe it probabilistically. So that's predicting it. So physics is really just our way of modeling the structure and laws of the universe. It does more justice than our senses do. It utilizes mathematics and experiments. It's a lot more precise. Now, I presume that all experience has some physical token to it. That any experience could be represented physically. But physics is not designed to answer questions like, what is it like to be this system? What is it like to be a bat? What is it like to see red? What is it like to be, essentially? What is being? What is the intrinsic nature of existence? These kind of ontological questions, these require an answer in phenomenal terms. And I mean, you could say, what is it like? It's like blue. What is blue? Blue is just a symbol for this kind of experience. I can say blue to a colorblind person. They're not going to understand it because it's a knowledge by acquaintance. You have to have that experience to understand the knowledge. So what is it like? You're going to have to give phenomenal terms. But unless you already know what those terms refer to, it's impossible. If there was some new color that an alien could see that humans couldn't see, they can't describe it if it's no combination of colors we know. But so you can't put that in physical terms. It would require an answer in phenomenal terms. Because I think the substance of the universe is phenomenal. That's my key insight. Not to say it can't be represented physically. I think there are different categories. One is about the form of the universe. One is about the substance of the universe. Or even the substance of reality, the nature of reality. So I'm not arguing against physicalism per se, but rather the orthodox material realist conceptualization of it. I still believe everything in the universe can be described physically and adheres to physical laws. I believe in the general spirit of physicalism. But what is the substance of the physical world itself? What is the intrinsic nature of this world, of energy? Everything is said to be made out of energy equals mc squared, right? So all matter is just energy. Well, what is energy exactly? What is its intrinsic nature? I'm asking, like, what does it mean to be energy? So what if the universe physics describes is one made of consciousness? There's no reason it couldn't be. In fact, it is. Which is the crazy part. It's unbelievable. So, what about unconscious things? How do we reconcile the fact that we believe in unconscious things with the fact that consciousness is a substance? Well, that is a topic for a future video because I've gave more than enough material to chew on in this one. But let's start from there. What's the substance of experience? Consciousness. We've made some progress. If consciousness is a substance, in fact. And if we accept that, then in a sense, the hard problem of consciousness dissolves. It's no longer makes sense. But it opens up a lot more questions. And I want to end with a few quotes. Here's what the founder of quantum theory has to say. Max Planck. I regard consciousness as fundamental. I regard matter as derivative from consciousness. We cannot get behind consciousness. Everything we talk about, everything we regard as existing postulates consciousness. And I'll leave you with a great quote by a polymath, Sir Arthur Eddington. He was an astronomer, mathematician, physicist, and philosopher. He said, "The stuff of the world is mind stuff. The mind stuff of the world is, of course, something more general than our individual conscious minds. The mind stuff is not spread in space and time. These are the part of the cyclic scheme ultimately derived out of it. It is necessary to keep reminding ourselves that all knowledge of our environment and from the world of physics is constructed, has entered in the form of messages transmitted along the nerves to the seat of consciousness. It's difficult for the matter-of-fact physicists to accept the view that the substratum of everything is of mental character. But no one can deny it, that mind is the first and most direct thing in our experience, and all else is remote inference. That is one of my favorite quotes on consciousness right there. Sir Arthur Eddington, he developed his own form of panpsychism. And there's so many, I have so many books like this one, Consciousness is Primary, that I'm going to do a separate video actually on all the modern day theorists who subscribe to idealist theories, because they're really coming together. I'll do a whole separate video on that, books and theorists. But for now, I hope you enjoyed it. I know it's a lot to take in. Definitely requires some contemplation here. But and be skeptical. Don't just take my word for it. I mean, that's the only reason I ended up having this experience, is that I was skeptical, and I kept pushing it, trying to falsify it, trying to see for myself. Because this is something where you see for yourself. It's based on direct experience. It's not something based on faith. It is more akin to science in that way. If you guys do want to see like a good introductory video, just very simple, eloquent, beautiful, you should watch Consciousness, the Final Frontier by Dada Gunamuktananda. He's a yogi. It is a very nice, gentle introduction into this whole world of metaphysics. Consciousness, the Final Frontier. I highly recommend it. It's on YouTube. Okay. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you so much for watching, and be on the lookout for my next videos.